saying it would be difficult to find a senior counsel who loves One Nation.
Or a junior counsel.
Or a local council.
Or a Scouts meeting.
The High Court agreed that as Cullerton wants to represent himself, he should be allowed the best possible defence.
So they've set up a date for tomorrow and told him he's allowed to speak for minus 23 minutes.
Attorney General George Brandis has been caught on microphone saying the Queensland Liberal counterparts are very, very mediocre.
But Brandis later apologised, saying he regretted the second very.
Oh, not since Peter Dutton has a politician just been able to say it like it is, especially when he thinks that no one is listening.
But to be fair, George Brandis is the government's leading expert on being very, very mediocre.
And finally, Pope Francis has officially announced priests can forgive abortions.
Because at the end of the day, abortions are the only way to reduce the number of priests who want to have sex with kids.
Vatican officials said that the forgiveness applied to the women, to the nurse, to the doctor and whoever supports this procedure. Though obviously, if you're a priest accused of child sexual abuse, you're on your own.
The Catholic Church is still against the use of condoms, though, preferring the method of immaculate contraception.
Some priests disagree with the Pope's decision and they argue priests should have a right to choose. Those are our headlines for the week, but now to look at something with a little more detail.
Today marks the 25th White Ribbon Day. Last month, the Council of Australian Governments held a summit where Malcolm Turnbull unveiled a new $30 million plan to reduce violence against women and children. He remarked that there had been a cultural shift regarding domestic violence in Australia. 2015 Australian of the Year, Rosie Batty, was also at the summit, but insists that while the money and that funding will definitely be appreciated and put to very valuable work, we're already talking about a really seriously underfunded service.
And I mean, I know the government is giving $30 million, but to be fair, this is the same government that cut $35 million from community legal centres, which are often the first point of contact for victims of domestic violence in the first place.
So it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and also you're pocketing $5 million.
Yeah.
And plus, it's like the victims it's like you've been given a lifeboat, but you don't have any oars.
Yeah, or like giving them a parachute with no strings attached. And like the $30 million is a start, I suppose. You know, it'll pay for things like, you know, legal advice and services for women who've been abused or victims of domestic violence, conflict resolution, and I think there's also some money set aside for a fund so that we can kick men's rights activists in the balls when we see them. So yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Really going to the right place. It does sound pretty good, but out of that $30 million, there is actually $1.7 million that's been retained for the government to cover their administrational costs.
That does make sense because the government is very stationary on this issue.
And their commitment to, you know, women in Australia is paper thin.
Yeah, ignoring women's rights remains a staple of government policy.
Yeah. There is some consensus about ending the situation where a woman in court can be cross-examined by their alleged abuser. That tends to happen when defendants either can't pay for a lawyer or just don't want to pay for a lawyer, and so then end up representing themselves in court.
So that is truly horrible. How can the government fix that?
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. The way they'll do it is to amend the Family Law Act and also increase legal aid funding to allow judges to appoint a lawyer to a defendant who doesn't have one. The only difficulty with that is that the Coalition and the Labor Party can't come to any agreement about how much that would cost.
Yeah, and part of that problem is the fact that legal aid is actually not a very politically sexy issue.
No, I mean, it's not something that most voters care about, even though they really should.
Yeah, well, we didn't even notice the cuts happen in the first place, so not sexy at all.
So how do we sex this up again? How do we get the money coming back in?
Tell you later. No, last White Ribbon Day. Stop it. They flew a giant military aircraft around Australia with the white ribbon on the tail of a plane.
So that was to raise money.
Was to raise awareness.
Right. Well, job done. Yeah. Sorted.
Take it off. I'm aware.
How many men wearing white ribbons does it take to raise awareness for domestic abuse?
Two. One to wear the white ribbon, and one to interrupt all the women around him and mansplain that all men are not that abusive.
Well, not all breaks are terrible, and we'll be back after this one. You're watching The Leap.
When it comes to technology, we all want the newest, fastest, most up-to-date gadgets we can get. Unless you're Anthony.
This is an $1,800 laptop. If I smashed this to bits with a rubber mallet, you'd think I'd gone crazy. And yet, that's exactly what we're doing when we install updates every single day. This story starts with my iPhone 4S. It's a 5-year-old phone, but it worked perfectly until I upgraded it to the latest software. Now it's slow, clunky, and erratic.
Still makes calls,
Still makes calls.
still gets texts,
Still gets texts.
still get annoying Facebook notifications.
Absolutely I do.
The reality is the device is not obsolete for your use, but it's obsolete in terms of what they want you to think it's for.
You're rocking the 7 Plus?
I am rocking a 7 Plus at the moment. For me, it's meant that my middle-sized devices I kind of don't use anymore because my phone screen's big enough to take some of those jobs away.
If you can find something better, by all means go for it. We're all going to be dead before the tips spill over anyway. But even with that newer, better thing, be prepared for update after update after update.
It's not necessarily malicious. It is often driven by the desire to give people a better user experience or give them a more secure experience.
We get really annoyed by upgrade fatigue. Facebook is a good example. They update their app every fortnight.
They never tell you why either. They just say, trust us, this is fine.
And often those upgrades are really annoying. You know, one was that they took away the ability to use Messenger through their app. You had to go and get a separate app for Messenger. Now that was an upgrade.
So don't upgrade, I hear you say. Well, good, settled, I won't.
It's like the old days. We used to hang on to Windows XP or a version of Microsoft Office that we really liked or whatever it was.
Does it break the heart of software people, of me being a dinosaur, that I'm not updating all the time?
It irritates organizations like Microsoft because they know there are so many unpatched defects in XP which they cannot fix.
Even as I'm talking to you right now, my computer at home, which I haven't updated, could be doing any number of things with it behind my back.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Microsoft can't push patches out to those computers. So those computers, millions of computers around the world, are now sort of an ideal nesting ground for remote access Trojans and malware, which can be used for attacks and so on.
Is it time for a revolution? Is it time for us to open up the devices that we paid for, we rightfully own, and take back control of them?
There is actually a generation that is learning to write drivers for operating systems that weren't intended to run on particular hardware platforms.
So in the same way I could get into the hood of my car and fix all that myself, I can now do that software-wise as well, if I learn all the tricks.
Well, there are websites with black backgrounds and evil penguins in the corner to show you how to do this stuff.
You can keep stuff for as long as you like. Will it work exactly the way you intend it to work? No. It's not like the old days where you used to go and buy your fridge and expect it to last 20 years.
Do you think we're ever going to get to the stage where we've worked out all the kinks, all the security problems, we're finished?
No, it's just getting worse.
Well, one of the most important issues facing people these days is legalising cannabis. Matt Riley is our guest tonight of Free Cannabis Victoria. Now, Matt, you have organised a 420 picnic. What is involved in that? I imagine a lot of pies.
Well, really, there should be more pies.
Snack foods.
Absolutely.
So walk us through a 420 picnic. I'm turning up. What's happening?
The idea of the 420 picnic is purely to give the people of the cannabis community something to go. We don't have anywhere, we don't have pubs or coffee shops or anything that is cannabis community specific. And so to form social networks and make new friends within the cannabis community, we have these picnics so you can come along and meet a bunch of other people who have similar interests.
Sounds great. I heard there's also a lot of police around you, but no one's been arrested. They all seem pretty cool with it. Are they also on the hooch?
Probably not, but no. Look, the police have been wonderful. They have turned up to a number of events over the years, but we've had respectful and reasonable discussions, and they've come to appreciate that we're not wanting to upset anyone. We're not getting anyone's face. We don't have banners or placards or anything like that, and we tidy up the gardens at the end of the day, so no one is upset or bothered.
We don't hear that about weed, do you? They don't hear about weed. You're gonna laugh yourself silly and have a nice nap. Like, downside to it. It's a pretty peaceful way to be, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, it is, but more importantly, that there's no reason to prohibit weed. There isn't a single genuine.
And I mean,
reason.
if you talk about opponents, I think there are some members of the state opposition here who've been a bit critical of you.
Sure.
Have you offered to have sort of maybe a private, sort of one-on-one, let's say, session with those people, maybe just to calm down a few of their concerns?
I've chatted with Bernie Finn
Oh, yeah.
a few times. We're great mates. I think Bernie Finn is a good man who has just been misinformed over the years. But I'm confident that Bernie will see the error of his thinking and perhaps be the champion of cause.
Right.
Yeah, if we're talking about one day legalising weed, are we worried about it getting into the hands of the kids? Because I believe we might have an image. We have a kid showing up at one of these. So that's a kid there, isn't it?
He's responsible for many a stolen bag of weed.
And that's how you get like hemp milk and stuff, isn't it? No. But,
I thought you were going to say he was dealing.
yeah.
But he ate it all.
So what is the actual situation at the moment? So it's legal, but for medicinal use?
No, it's pretty well prohibited. They're actually sneaking in legislation in the background to make penalties more severe.
Really?
It's sort of smoke and mirrors. I mean,
Yeah, smoke and mirrors. Yeah.
Not so many mirrors.
the cannabis legislation has been toughened up under the guise of, the ICE task force. But if you actually look through all of the fine detail, it's about cannabis.
But there's so many health benefits, even just from hemp products, like hemp protein powders and hemp seeds as well.
Let's just imagine that cannabis was as beneficial as a soggy brown paper bag.
Okay.
There is no reason to criminalise people for using it. Simple as that. Prohibition actually causes a lot of harm to people. It disrupts their lives. There's all sorts of problems that arise because of prohibition. And there's no reason for it.
And there are questions about whether prohibition works anyway. I mean, do you have any sort of idea of how many people are smoking, weed?
Prohibition works really well. It doubles the number of people who use the drug, and it drives the price up very, very high. Yeah. Prior to prohibition really being enforced at the start of the 70s, you could get an ounce of weed for $30.
Right. So really, the big beneficiaries of prohibition are dealers.
Well, the dealers, yes, but the real beneficiaries of prohibition are the legal system, the law enforcement,
the God's police.
What we really want is the benefit to be on the right side as opposed to the wrong side.
Well, for sure.
Matt, thank you so much for talking with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Riley.
Celebrities, huh? Good God now, what are they good for? Absolutely nothing. Or are they? We're part of the me generation. Close enough. We want instant gratification from shiny things, and then we want to pay slightly more for a slightly shinier version of the same thing. And then celebrities use their power, influence, and sometimes even their tits to sell us stuff we don't even need, just so they can make more money, to buy more stuff, and parade around like a human catalogue. Sorry, that is a human centipede. I said catalogue. Close enough. All so that they can be the coolest kid in Cool Town times infinity plus one. And through this over-indulgent, narcissistic, mindless, money-obsessed mayhem, thankfully there are some celebs getting it right. This week, US President Barack, please don't leave us, Obama, awarded the nation's highest civilian honour, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, to the people that have inspired him and made meaningful contributions to their country. And amongst those recipients was comedian and talk show host Ellen DeGeneres.
Ellen DeGeneres has shown us that a single individual can make the world a more fun, more open, more loving place, so long as we just keep swimming.
And look, There are a lot of nasty pasties in the world. There's one there, you little cheeky bastard, who are motivated by power, by greed, and by designer sunglasses. But, stop it. It's important to remember there are still a lot of good eggs out there as well. Like, for instance, Leonardo DiCaprio. Close enough. He's currently working on a Captain Planet movie to teach kids about environmental issues and that it's also okay to sport a green mullet. Two very equal important lessons. And his foundation is dedicated to the long-term health and well-being of all the Earth's inhabitants. All of them. Even this tosser. G'day. And our very own boy from Oz, Hugh Jackman, and wife Deborah Lee contribute to over 27 different charities, including the Red Cross, cancer research, the Global Poverty Project, and pretty much anything involving tap dancing. And also, Amy Poehler, she runs Amy Poehler's Smart Girls, empowering young people to be themselves, putting an emphasis on intelligence and information over just being cool, man, and fitting in. Advice I could have used as a 12-year-old gemstone collecting drama gig. And Ashton Kutcher gave this incredible speech at the 2013 Teen Choice Awards.
The sexiest thing in the entire world is being really smart. And being thoughtful, and being generous. Everything else is crap, I promise you.
See? Even the star of 2.5 Men is doing his bit for humanity. But teaching people, especially impressionable youths, to be the change they want to see in the world and not what they want to see in the wallet is a pretty important lesson. And I hope this becomes the norm, and people start helping out people and that becomes popular, because you know what? That's what really makes you the coolest kid in Cool Town times infinity +1.
Welcome back, you're watching The List. Everyone likes to think you're charitable, I know I am, but how much do we really like giving to charity?
down when someone stops asking you for money to stop panda dancing becoming a thing in China by 2025, or to raise money for people affected by an allergy to adverbs, or to raise money and awareness about how pesticides are turning silkworms into donkeys made of wasps. Okay, that person is probably crazy. But more commonly, you get stopped in the street by someone asking you to make a monthly donation to a worthy cause like UNICEF. And it's happening more and more now, and people are getting more and more annoyed by it, to such an extent that the charity collectors are getting abused. Now people are even referring to those people as charity muggers, which is never good, because someone's job title should not be synonymous with the concept of theft. Well, I mean, apart from lawyers, obviously. But speaking of lawyers, recently a class action was launched in the federal court suing a marketing and fundraising company called APCO, which hires a lot of charity collectors. And it contains shocking details about how charity collectors, often aged 18 to 25, often students or backpackers, are grossly underpaid and their employment conditions are absolutely awful. So what's life for a charity collector really like? Well, understandably, none of them agreed to go on camera because they would lose their job. But through off-the-record interviews and analysis of the legal documents, we put together what we think a charity collector's day looks like. So I grabbed myself a clipboard and a lanyard and hit the streets to find out what it's really like. So, having taken this job because I was motivated, hardworking and goal-oriented, and having been told I could make as much as $250,000 in 2 to 3 years, I'm rostered on for an 8-hour shift. But I'm paid on commission, which can be as low as 20%. So if I sign someone up for $10 a month, that's $2 to me. The lead claimant in the APCO case, Jacob Bywater, estimates he worked 80 hours a week over 7 days for almost 2 years. On a good week, he'd make $25 an hour. On a bad week, that could be as low as $2.50. Oh, and if the threat of poverty wasn't enough to keep me out here, how about the constant pressure to meet sales targets? That's me getting a text from my team leader reminding me my numbers were down this week. And what happens if I don't meet targets? How about slugging? If I haven't met my targets by Friday morning, I'm pressured to enter a race where I lie on my stomach, hold my legs behind my back, and wriggle to the finish line. Oh, and that's in front of all of my colleagues, obviously. Or, according to Tyrone Corbett, another claimant, I might be forced to insert a cigarette into my rectum, then light up. And by the way, this morning, when I got to the office, I was 20 seconds late. So I had to roll around on the floor pretending to be a fish while colleagues shouted salmon at me. I went to law school. Then we listened to motivational music for 20 to 30 minutes to get us ready for the day. And if you're thinking that's fine because of all the overtime, penalty rates and superannuation I'll get, think again, because this job comes with none of that. So $250,000? Think again. So I'm pulling the pin on this after only a day, which, from the people we spoke to, isn't all that unusual. These organisations churn through staff all the time and they don't really care. Oh, and the next time you're walking through the city and you walk past a charity collector, maybe think about saying something other than fuck off. And if you're a charity, definitely think about never dealing with APCO.
Well, we all know North Korea is a little bit... But South Korea... South Korea should be politically stable. Or is it?
In recent weeks, a political scandal has gripped South Korea that is almost unbelievably weird, sparking mass protests for the last month. It's emerged that, despite being a private citizen with no security clearance, Chae Sun-sil, friend and so-called spiritual advisor to President Park Geun-hye, has been giving more than spiritual advice, schooling the president on everything, from her outfits to her speeches, and worst of all, to actual South Korean government policy.
So that is a bit like Malcolm Turnbull going around to Andrew Bolt's house and them having a couple of cigars and some cognacs, and then he becomes utterly brainwashed and actually takes his awful, awful advice.
That's just everything you said about Miss Skin Girl with ooh, Mufasa. I like to think of it maybe as like Chae and Pac having like a little sleepover, talking about, I don't know, truth or dare, about classified information.
Yeah, so truth. Now this is classified.
Yeah, so instead of like gossiping about boys and that sort of, they're gossiping about North Korea's latest nuclear missile tests.
It's like any BFF would do. Like seriously, how bad is it just chatting to your friend for over like 40 years?
Well, for starters, I mean, this friend has no security clearance and is also the daughter of an infamous cult leader.
Yeah, but you don't need security clearance when you're immortal and you can transcend through time and space.
That's true.
So President Park's approval rating has dropped below 10%. Now, I know cult leader is bad, but is it 10% bad?
Yeah, the worst Tony Abbott ever managed was actually 30%, but he listened to cult leaders all the time.
Far too much Keith Urban.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, apart from being a weird cult leader, she's also used her connections to get businesses to donate to various charities she runs, and then misspent a lot of that money, for instance, on personal things, like this person bought her daughter horse riding lessons.
Oh, come on, Pat, you big prude. We've all done that at least once.
lessons.
Well, given she's
Yeah.
been indicted and is now going to be facing prosecution, think about your answer, Anthony. Have you done that at least once?
I mean, she had a lot of that's a BFF red flag right there.
Yeah, she used charity money to buy horse riding lessons. That is an evil woman if I ever heard one.
And just know that they'll use those horse lessons to then hunt down humans for sport.
Yeah, totally. And then just like sew them all up in some weird jacket and sell it on Korean eBay.
Fashion advice. Yeah.
Also known as eBay.
Well, and now everyone is calling for President Park to step down, but she still has just over a year left in her presidency. And this is true. While president, she is immune from prosecution. So, crime spree? Anyone?
Okay.
You know what? Call me old-fashioned, but I feel like any friend that insists you call them a spiritual advisor, we need to be suspicious of that person.
No, you don't need to be suspicious.
We don't need to be suspicious.
We love that friend.
We love that friend.
This segment is over.
And that's our show for tonight. A big thank you to all our special guests, as well as our radiant hosts, Jacqueline Mifsud, Pat McCaffrey, and Lauren Bock. I'm Anthony McCormack. Good night.